Well, with the announcement of March of the Lich King and Death Knights, and specifically Death Knights having runes and that affecting deck building, I really loved that concept, and it made me think, what if every class had a rune system, and how would some of those cards look? So this is my entire project here on if every class had runes and what some of those cards would look like, including one custom card for each class. Now, I started with coming up with the runes. What would the different runes look like? Of course, we had the three that were announced with the Death Knight of the Blood, Frost, and Unholy. Now, when I was coming up with this system, I decided I wanted to keep Unholy as Death Knight only. I wanted that to be specific to Death Knights in this every class has runes system, but some of the classes did get Frost and Blood. And then I came up with basically a split of what all of the different classes would use, and these are the runes that I came up with. Totaling 12 runes, including the three that were announced with the Death Knights. We have the Fel Rune, the Fire Rune, a Shadow Rune, Lightning Rune, Holy Rune, of course, the Blood Rune, and the Frost Rune, which both of those are already existing with Death Knights, the Arcane Rune, the Beast Rune, and Poison and Life runes. None of the classes have the same 3 runes. There are some that have 2 that are the same as another class, but the third one is not the same. So I made sure that none of the classes had the same 3 runes. Demon Hunter has Fel, Shadow, and Blood. For this, I thought, we already have a lot of Fel stuff with Fel spells and Jace. So I decided I think Jace would be a good candidate to actually be a Fel card. And I decided he would probably only have 2 Fel runes and not a full 3. I think you can fit in some cards that would end up being 1 of Shadow or Blood into some of those decks. For Shadow, this is my custom card here. This is Shadow Blade. It is a 4 mana, 4 attack, 2 durability weapon. It is 3 Shadow runes because it's kind of powerful, but with being Shadow, I thought, you know what, let's add some stealth in here. Demon Hunter hasn't had a lot of stealth necessarily, so let's add some in. So every time that you attack with this weapon, you give your minions stealth. Now, of course, if there's any sort of weapon buffs that increase the durability, you're going to get even more uses out of this. But to be able to combo something like this with attacking with your minions and then attacking with the weapon, give them stealth, very powerful. So a lot of Shadow ability there. And then for the Blood rune for Demon Hunter, I thought, you know what? Blood in their description is kind of big minions, maybe some removal and life total type things. So I think in Demon Hunter, the Chaos Nova that's clearing the board would be a pretty good candidate to be a 2 Blood rune card. And Illidari Inquisitor, it's a big hefty minion. I don't think it necessarily needs to be 2 or 3 runes. So I think this is a good candidate for a 1 Blood rune card. And looking at Druid next, Druid I decided would have Life, Beast, and Poison runes. Definitely there was a lot that you could put in this category for Druid in the Life rune. But I think the Cenarian Ward, getting armor and creating a big thing, kind of similar a little bit to Blood, but in terms of gaining life, that seemed like a hefty amount of life to gain. So I put Cenarian Ward at a 2 life rune. Then moving into the Beast rune, a couple things here. I definitely think that Topior, the Shrubagazor, is, even though it's whelps and dragons, I think it still relates to beasts. It's a pretty big body itself. And it kind of fits into that just feral type of spec like you would see in World of Warcraft. So I thought, you know what, Druid and Beasts and all these just kind of large minions and these whelps, that fits. But Topior on its own is pretty strong, so I decided to actually give it the 3 runes instead of 2. If you're gonna go in on that, you are going in fully on the Beast. And the other one, Savage Roar, I think also fits into that kind of feral beast-like type of build and specialization. So I figured this would be a good candidate to be at 2 runes. You could fit this in if you wanted to do like a 2 beast and 1 poison type of deck and still get a lot of value off of this with big board. And then finally for Druid with poison, I made this custom spell. It is 5 mana, Death by Poison. It is give your minions Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 treant with poison. Setting this at the 2 poison, I think could be pretty powerful and very versatile. Again, you could kind of make a 2 poison, 1 beast type of deck, or maybe even 2 poison, 1 life, and kind of just work with that. But even being able to get 2, 3, 4 minions with that poison token as a death rattle seems like it could be very powerful. Jumping into Hunter, again, this one I also gave the Beast rune. So Beast, Poison, and Blood. 2 of the same runes that we just had with Druid, but the Blood is a little bit different. Just looking through these, Beast, absolutely, I think Hydrolodon is a very, very powerful and impactful beast. I think that, you know, if we went through and changed these, Hydrolodon would definitely have to be a 3 beast rune type of card. Then looking at Poison, here's my custom card, the Poison Dart Frog. It's a 3 mana 2/2 beast with a battle cry, poison all enemy minions. They lose 1 health at the end of each turn. Now, that seems like a pretty powerful effect. The end of each turn, and it's only enemy minions. So this is an epic, and it does have 2 of those runes in there. Blood for Hunter, some type of removal, manipulating health totals, some big things, which I think there could be some cards in Hunter that fit into the kind of big minions category. But I thought actually the kind of manipulation of the board and health totals really kind of fit with some of these secrets, Explosive Trap and Freezing Trap specifically. They just kind of fit into that like a manipulating the board with the health and not allowing a minion on board with that Freezing Trap. And then for Mage, we've already been seeing this. Mage felt very easy to give these runes to. Fire, Frost, Arcane. Yeah, pretty consistent, I think, with what we've already seen in Mage. Definitely not a surprise there. But I thought, you know what? Okay, Wildfire has definitely been very popular. And I think if that's going into the fire category, I'm actually going to give that 2 fire runes instead of 1. Just because I think you want to be a little bit more picky and choosy with this rune system on which cards are fitting in. And you can't really just have too many cards at a single rune. There will have to be some cards in a system like this that have only 1 rune to fit in with all of the cards that have 2, so that you can actually complete a deck. But Wildfire, the strength of Wildfire, and increasing the damage of a hero power permanently through a game, I think deserved the 2 runes. Then for Frost, again, pretty easy. These were kind of already in there. So the Frozen Touch and Solid Alibi, I think, are fantastic candidates for this Frost category for Mage. Both I set at 2 Frost runes. Again, kind of the same thinking as Wildfire. They just feel very impactful, and the ability for the Frozen Touches to be repeatable is very powerful. So I think if you were wanting to do that, if this were leaning into kind of the specializations, kind of like you would see in World of Warcraft, then if you're a Frost Mage, you want to lean a little more into that Frost. And the final category, Arcane. Now I created this legendary for the Arcane, and that is Grand Magister of the Arcane. An 8 mana 5/5. For the rest of the game, your arcane spells cost 1, but never less than 1. We don't want those costing 0. But that still is a very, very impactful effect. And for the rest of the game, your spells, arcane spells costing 1, I think is so powerful that I definitely wanted to set this at 3 arcane runes. Again, if you're going arcane and you're getting this very powerful effect, you are a pure arcane, full arcane type of deck. So 3 arcane runes for the Grand Magister of the Arcane. Now for Paladin, trying to think about Paladin, especially in terms of World of Warcraft, was kind of an interesting challenge. They do some stuff with like healing and divine shields. So I thought, you know what, Holy and Life, I think would kind of really fit into Paladin very nicely. The third rune, though, seemed a little bit more tricky, and I thought, I think this could be where lightning comes into play, and I think lightning fits into this Paladin very, very easily. So lightning is one that I created. It's only used in a couple of the classes, again, kind of split with Paladin for the Blood Elves, and then used again in Shaman, who sided with the Undead Scourge. Holy Paladin, there are so many cards that could have fit into this holy category. Absolutely so many holy spells. But I think kind of one that would be really easy to kind of start, and then you could build kind of around it, would be Cariel Rome. Not the hero, but the 4 mana minion that discounts, it has that divine shield, but it also discounts your holy spells. So I put Cariel at a 2 holy rune kind of requirement there. And then if you are building a holy paladin, you could kind of fill in a little bit with singles from there. Then looking at the life cards, I think Great Hall, the location, was a really good candidate for this life rune, setting it at 2 runes. So again, you kind of could fit it in with like maybe a double life, single holy type of deck. And just again, that life, it's not necessarily like life steal, life gain, but it's manipulating life totals. And I think it's flexible enough that you could set it, you know, you could use it on your opponent's minion or your own minion, depending on what cases you need. So it felt like it really just kind of fit into that life type of rune. And of course, the other one, we definitely have to talk about Light Forged Cariel, that hero. Very, very powerful effect. And I think the fact of being able to take half damage, basically since after the card is played, unless somebody is running specifically weapon removal, just creates enough of a powerful effect and kind of life manipulation with taking the half damage that I thought this definitely would be a 3 life rune type of card. And then for the lightning category, this custom card that I made a weapon here, Lightning Spike. This is a 3 mana, 2 attack, 2 durability weapon. Battle Cry, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. Now, with it being lightning and it's, you know, being able to kind of come out early, you could even coin this out to be able to play it on turn 2. You're dealing an AoE to your opponent's minions, and then you get to attack on top of that. It felt like it could be pretty powerful. Maybe not that you're building your deck around this or that it's such a powerful effect. It needs to be 3, but I definitely think 2 lightning runes is what this card deserves. Now taking a look at Priest. Again, a little bit of crossover here, same as Paladin had, Holy and Life, I definitely think fits into the priest kind of specs and playstyles. But unlike paladins, you know, there are some of those shadow priests going around. So I definitely think the shadow priest had to be in Hearthstone. So Holy, Shadow, and Life are the 3 runes for priest. And for Holy, again, just like Paladin, there's a lot of holy spells already in the game, a ton of different cards that kind of could fit into this holy category. So I decided, you know what, I think this would be a very powerful effect here, but Light Bomb, I think, would fit at a 3 holy rune type of card. If you're going to go in on holy, you want those big removals. This definitely does some stuff, and it does allow you to play a ton of other holy spells. If you put this in at the full 3 holy runes, you can really build a lot of some of those holy spells that would be healing in with things like this holy removal. Then for Shadow, a couple of cards here. I think Eternal Servitude, being able to discover a friendly minion that has died and bringing it back. That feels kind of very shadowy, a little bit more like dark side magic, not necessarily like the holy and light, you know, type of magics. So I think that would be a 2 shadow rune type of card. And then on the other side, again, the Blackwater Behemoth, kind of not really like a holy, you know, healing friendly type of beast. That is a very strong, powerful, very terrifying looking beast that wants to eat you. So this I set at the 3 shadow runes, very powerful card. And for Life, this is the custom card that I made. It is Local Healer, a 2 mana, 1 attack, 3 health minion with a battle cry. Gain 1 life for each spell in your hand. Again, kind of leaning into that, the life of actually gaining some life here. And it's a pretty cheap minion. Kind of also works with having spells in your hand. And setting this at 2 life runes does mean that you could still play some other life cards. Maybe if there's a shadow spell that's, you know, ends up being a 1 rune that you want to play, or likewise with the holy, there could be some 1 rune holy spells that you could fit in with this card and buff up the amount of spells in your hand and in your deck to gain a lot of life with this. Now moving into Rogue, again, paired with the Undead Scourge. I thought rogues can be kind of nasty, secretive, you know, poisonous type of characters. And I think Shadow, Poison, and Blood would be very fitting for rogues. Now, I will say the kind of tricky thing with Blood, based on the description that they gave for the Blood rune with Death Knight, of the kind of board removal, big minions, there's not necessarily anything that really stood out to me in Rogue at the moment. I think some things kind of in the past, years and years ago, might have fit that, but now, as things have gotten kind of nerfed a little bit and Rogue has leaned very much into playing a lot of things, you know, in a turn, I think the definition or kind of what cards would fit into the Blood for Rogue did kind of make me think a little bit differently about it. But before we jump into the Blood cards, I want to take a look at Shadow first. Shadow, of course, there's already a lot of like stealth type minions and synergies in Rogue. So I thought that definitely seems like a Shadow style. So the card that I think really kind of fits into that Shadow playstyle for Rogue is Shroud. And I set it at 2 shadow runes. I don't think it's so powerful that you would actually want this at a 3 rune type of level. But I think it's powerful enough that you probably wouldn't want it at 1. If you're leaning a little bit more into shadow and kind of this rune type of system, I think a lot of the cards that have kind of powerful effects like this end up at that 2 rune. So that you really have to pick and choose which other cards that you're putting with it. Now, poison, I again created another custom weapon. This one is the Concealed Poison Dagger, an epic weapon. It's a 3 mana, 1 attack, 3 durability with a death rattle. Give all friendly minions poison. Okay, so this again definitely had to be, I think, 2 runes. I don't think the effect is so powerful that this would have to be at 3. I considered for a little bit, maybe making like every time you attacked, it gave your minions poison. But then I thought, no, that's really ridiculous. I think that would be really powerful. And if I did do something like that, it would have to be 3 runes for sure. But I think the ability for it to be a death rattle and be overridden, kind of removed and replaced with the rogue hero power does give it that little bit of flexibility in terms of when you set off the death rattle effect. And it's got the 3 attacks, so you can still kind of use it a little bit to hit into small minions or push an additional damage to face, even buff it up with some of the kind of weapon spells that we've seen in Rogue before using it. So this is, I think, one of the kind of directions that I would love to see for like a poison rogue. And then moving into blood, I was talking a little bit ago about just kind of rogue and blood were a little bit interesting to try to figure out how I wanted to actually kind of like fit some of these cards in. But one that stood out to me, it's not necessarily a big minion, a big body in itself, but I think Draka, Necrolord Draka, would actually be a good card for blood, like a blood rogue. And I said it at the 2. I don't think it would be a 3, just because it is very powerful, but it does kind of need some other tools with it to actually be able to pull off larger weapons. So I didn't want to set it at 3. I think that was a little bit too high of a requirement for Draka. So I set it at 2 blood runes. Now taking a look at Shaman. Again, Shamans are working with the Undead Scourge. You know what? I thought, okay, we've already got lightning covered with Paladin for the Blood Elves. I think also lightning, there's already some kind of like nature lightning-y type spells in Shaman anyways. So frost, lightning, and fire seemed like the most logical rune and spec types for Shaman in Hearthstone. Now for frost, again, there's a ton of different frost spells, specifically already labeled as frost, that could be used for this. But I think Wildpaw Cavern is actually a pretty good card that I would see at maybe 2 frost runes. Again, kind of fitting in that same thing. It's making you kind of choose and be a little bit more choosy in which decks and which cards these are being played in with this rune system. So I think Wildpaw Cavern, it's not so powerful that I think it needed to be 3, but I think it's powerful enough that leaving it at just a single frost rune would actually allow a little bit too much use, almost like we're seeing now. It kind of just would go into a lot of different Shaman decks. So I think the 2 frost runes felt pretty good here. Then moving into lightning. Now this one was kind of fun and interesting. A lot of the spells with the spell schools are nature. There's not like an actual lightning spell school. So of course you got to have the lightning storm. It has it in the name. It's in there. But this one, with the change that they did make with the overload requirement for this, I did actually just set it at 1 lightning rune. Now, if this were back at the overload 1 and not overload 2, then I think it might have an argument for actually being a 2 lightning rune type of card. But I think this still seems pretty good. It's a little bit of lightning type effects, and there's not necessarily, I think, enough already in the game that kind of would be lightning. But this one would be a good candidate. And Doomhammer. I decided that I think I wanted this in lightning. I thought about fire, but you know, of course, kind of the similarity with Doomhammer and Mjolnir. Can't deny that. So in my mind, it had to be lightning. So I decided that with this Doomhammer, it is pretty powerful. That Wind Fury can do a lot. We've seen it kind of be a staple in some Shaman decks in the past, and I think it kind of fits in that 2 lightning rune type of spot. It's not powerful enough to really warrant a full-blown lightning deck, but it still is a bit strong. Now, for the fire for Shaman, I created this Flame Demon. It is an epic minion. It is both an elemental and a demon, and it is a 5 mana for 3. Every time this takes damage, deal 2 damage to all enemies. Now, this effect I thought was pretty powerful. Every time this takes damage, you're dealing 2 to all enemies, not just all, all minions. It's dealing damage to the face, and it's not hitting your own minions or anything on the board. And I thought that could be a really powerful effect. Now, the thing with this is I decided to go ahead and actually give it the 3 runes, the 3 flame runes, because I think that that effect is pretty powerful. And at the 5 mana, I did actually kind of debate about this. I thought about maybe making it 6 mana and a 2 rune kind of card, but I decided to really lean into this. And honestly, maybe even if we're really making this powerful, we just make it a 4 mana for 3. But I thought, well, we'll see how it would play out at like 5 first, and then you could test it from there. But this Flame Demon, very powerful effect. It would definitely be something that your opponent wants to kill off in as little hits as possible. And especially having that dual type tag could fit into a variety of variations. So very powerful flame fire rune based card here. Now for warlocks, again, this kind of seemed like they already had some of these, existing in the cards and spells already. So it felt a little easy to kind of put these runes into Warlock, but I landed on Fel, Shadow, and Fire. Now, I think, honestly, Fire and Fel seemed a little interesting for Warlock. Obviously, Fel has been kind of a little bit more used in, like, Demon Hunter, but there are some things here. But I decided, well, Fel might need a little bit more help, so I created this demon for the Fel Rune, which is a Radiant Fel Demon. It is a demon, 7 mana, 6/6, and at the end of your turn, deal 3 damage to all enemy minions. This is, again, a pretty powerful effect. The turn you would play it, you would get the effect at least once before your opponent has a chance to do anything. And I think dealing 3 can deal with a lot of different stuff. It's got still a pretty decent body on it. So this is kind of interesting. Now, I don't think that this card would be kind of the end all be all most powerful Fel type of effect. So I actually decided to only give this 2 Fel runes. Now, it is a very powerful effect, so if something like this were in the game, maybe it would have to be adjusted a little bit, but I think the bit of a steeper cost makes 2 runes feel pretty good here. And then for the Shadow, I really kind of debated about this, but to me, the kind of most clear, obvious choices for Shadow would be the cards that actually give your opponent a curse. And I decided to actually do the Abyssal Wave as a 3 Shadow Rune card because the effect is very, very powerful. Now, if I were to go in and do all of the other cards, I think all of the other curse cards I would set at 2 each. But the Abyssal Wave, I think even we've seen that in kind of the curse decks that have been played in the recent weeks and months, is that Abyssal Wave isn't even always included, which is kind of why I set it at the 3. If you were to build a deck with this rune system and you really wanted this card, you would have to go all in on Shadow. But if you wanted to have some of those other curse tools, they would be 2, and then you could fill in a little bit with that 3rd rune. And then for fire, there are some fire spells in Warlock, but I thought, what seems more like setting something on fire than playing this Dreadlich Tamsin hero, clearing off the entire board, not just your opponent's minions, and basically getting rid of your hero power and replacing it. Seems very like a burn it all down and start over type of effect. So I thought the Dreadlich Tamsin could be a 2 fire rune kind of card. And lastly, we have Warrior, again, pairing with the Blood Elves. Now, Warrior, definitely you kind of think of big things. You think of removal, armor gain, and, in World of Warcraft, they're kind of tanks, right? There's a lot of armor, a lot of life, just soaking that up. And so I thought, I think this could be really interesting for a blood, fire, and life type of rune system for Warrior. Again, leaning into the definition of blood that they gave for Death Knights with like the big minions and like life totals. I decided that Grommash Hellscream would definitely be a 2 blood rune type of card. It's a big, hefty minion, does a lot, especially when it's damaged. And the other one is the Tidal Revenant. Now, this one is not necessarily the largest body, but it does a lot. It has a decent set body, it gives you armor, and it deals damage all at the same time. This was one that I kind of debated if it would be blood or fire because of the damage or life because of the armor gain. So this one felt like a really interesting card when I was looking at it as a candidate. And I decided on blood just because, again, the definition that they gave with Death Knights, really leaning into like bigger minions and kind of life manipulation. So I thought, well, dealing damage and gaining the armor at the same time as there's a somewhat decently statted body seemed more like it would fit into the blood category more so than fire or life. And for fire, I created another custom weapon, the Sword of Flames. Now, this one is another one where I kind of debated where I wanted to set it in terms of the like mana cost and how many runes, but I decided I kind of like it at, let's make this an all-in fire weapon. So it's got 3 fire runes, but it is a 5 mana, 4 attack, 3 durability weapon. And whenever you attack with it, it's going to deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. So if you use this and hit into a minion, you're going to be able to hit into that minion, possibly clearing it with that 4 attack, and also deal 2 damage to the enemy hero at the same time. So it doesn't even have to be you attacking the enemy hero. It's just whenever you attack with it, you would deal that too. And again, this is one I initially put at 6 mana, and I was going to have it at 2 runes, but I thought, no, I think this would be, 6 might be a little too costly, but at 5 mana, and all of these hits available, especially with some cards that could potentially buff it up or increase the amount of hits that you can do with the weapon. It felt like a all-in on flame and fire. So that's the fire card for Warrior. And then for life, life was a little bit more interesting. Again, not so much leaning into like the healing aspects, like maybe paladins or priests, but instead leaning into the armor side of life. And so I thought Shield Block would be a pretty interesting card. I really debated if this would be a 2 rune or just 1, but I think going in on really just gaining the armor, I put it at 2. That way you would kind of really be committing to the armor gain and maybe some draw type effects in Warrior, as opposed to something like the Blood, where you're more leaning into the big minions. So that's the direction I went there. And then this other card, kind of interesting. It really hasn't seen a lot of play, but Bring It On, a 2-mana spell that gives you 10 armor. Now, it does kind of give your opponent a little bit of a benefit, but gaining 10 armor for 2 mana, very cheap. And there are other cards that could work with gaining that amount of armor. So I thought this actually could be a pretty interesting one to just set at 1 life rune. It still kind of leans in on the armor, so it fits into that life category. But again, because there is that like upside for your opponent, I didn't want to set it at 2 because that definitely would just be terrible. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for checking this out. I seriously had so much fun doing this, creating my own like runes and my own custom cards and kind of creating these scenarios. If you did enjoy this, I am working on hitting that first 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't, definitely would appreciate that subscriber and, you know, a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And I think one very interesting thing that I do want to note is the addition of runes. I think not only to Death Knight cards, but if we had a system like this for all of the classes, being able to make buffs or nerfs, but balance changes would be so much more interesting. I talked about with a couple of the cards where maybe you don't change the mana, but you change the amount of runes required. You could lower the amount of runes and then see if it, you know, a card sees a little bit more play. So I think it just adds another layer to the ways that cards could get changed. And I absolutely loved that. So I am very, very excited to see what happens with Death Knights in the upcoming expansion and see if any of that that I kind of experienced while working on this does actually happen with the cards that we see. So again, thank you so much for checking this out. And if you're excited for the Death Knights too, and you haven't already, check out my bit of a deep dive video into Death Knights, really explaining their rune system, how the deck building works, how you collect the cards for Death Knights, and more.